Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News. I'm Natalie Ehrlich with a look now at the world's economic highlights. Coming up, France's Rafel Jet inks a deal with Egypt, signaling the promise of more foreign contracts. And as the U.S. warms up now to Cuba, one Florida jetliner expects new heights for business. But first, we take a look at the headlines. Well, foreign direct investment in China last month grew at its strongest pace in nearly 4 years. China's Commerce Ministry said today that foreign money flows surged 29.4% from a year ago, reaching $13.9 billion. Analysts did warn, though, not to read too much into these economic indicators for January alone, given the strong seasonal distortions caused by the timing of this year's New Year holidays, which started February 19 instead of January 31st.
There are indeed some concerns right now. Some market experts, economists and journalists worry about whether there will be deflation. According to what we have learned and from the consumption data for January I just released, we believe that attention should be necessarily paid. But the deflation that everyone is concerned about will not occur at the moment.
Japan government figures released today reveal the economy expanded an annualized 2.2% in the final quarter of last year, successfully rebounding from recession triggered by last year's sales tax hike. While growth was still weaker than analysts had expected, household and corporate spending disappointed, suggesting a tepid recovery as the hangover from last year's sales tax hike carries on, underlying the challenge PM Shinzo Abe still faces as he tries to tackle decades of stagnation. Well, Japan's top government spokesman, meanwhile, credited the government's decision to postpone the second sales tax hike.
The economy grew at least 2.2% in the annualized rate, and I think it shows that the steps the government took were correct.
And the International Monetary Fund signaled this week that Egypt's structural and monetary reforms were starting to work. The economy, which has suffered persistent turmoil since 2011, started showing signs of recovery. For one, the uprising that toppled Hosni Mubarak was a big drag on the economy 4 years ago, discouraging investors and tourists alike. And during that period, growth fell below 2%. Meanwhile, reforms under Sisi appear to be helping, such as asking the IMF to assess its financial and economic state in hopes of a positive report may boost its international image ahead of a key investors conference this coming March. Well, still at 13%, Egypt's unemployment rate remains stubbornly high. The IMF insists more must be done to create jobs.
The top economic priority for Egypt is jobs. Egypt needs to support growth and create jobs while at the same time bringing down the budget deficit and maintaining foreign exchange reserves.
Well, here in Israel, consumer prices dropped 0.9% in January, their biggest monthly decline since September 2006. Well, figures from the Central Bureau of Statistics released yesterday indicate a sharp 8.9% drop for water and sewage, and an 8.8% fall in energy prices, thanks in large part now to a global decline in petrol prices. Well, in January, clothing and shoes also fell 6%, as communications and transportation declined 1.9%. Food prices were down 0.2%. Well, the January figure brought the average price now a decline over these last 12 months to 0.5%. Although falling prices often point to an economy in distress, yesterday, economists said Israeli deflation most reflected other factors, such as government-controlled prices and also the rising global energy supply. Well, France's Rafale fighter jet successfully secured its first foreign contract with Egypt. The news comes just as Egypt conducted airstrikes on IS targets in Libya. Here's more from Daniel Roth.
In less than 3 months, the deal was sealed. The first order of the French Rafale fighter jet to go abroad was placed by Egypt. 24 jets will be heading to Egypt within 5 years in a deal worth more than €5 billion, which includes missiles too.
Altogether, it represents a contract of €5 billion. It is indeed the first export contract for the Rafale. Until now, the French state was the only buyer. But we were very happy with them, so happy that we wanted to share this happiness with others. But the French state has faced a number of difficulties, not only in the last 2.5 years, but for many years. And the number of promises didn't come through.
There have been disappointments. The program, launched in April 1988 by Dassault, was delayed by 10 years, with the first flights only taking place in May 1991 and deliveries beginning only in 2006. Breaking into the combat aircraft field is not easy, as it's expensive to buy and hard to produce. The Rafale costs more than 100 million euro and almost 15,000 euro for maintenance every hour. But to make sure this jet would get exported, Paris made some concessions.
Du prix et du financement. Pour le prix,
as far as the price is concerned, it is for the industrials to negotiate. But regarding financing, the government made a number of efforts. Why did we do these efforts? Not only to sell Rafales, but also because I consider that in the current circumstances, it's very important to allow Egypt to contribute to stability and to be safe.
Agir pour la stabilité et être en sécurité.
Doubts related to the financing of the Rafale abound, though, as resources devoted to defense are dwindling. Today, defense represents only 1.5% of French GDP, and as well, 50% of the order is being financed by French insurer Coface and a number of French banks. In other words, of the 5.2 billion euro brought in by the sale, Egypt will only pay half up front. Still, according to the CEO of Dassault, these Rafale sales to Egypt could attract new customers.
There are other potential clients in the Middle East. I never like to talk much about these prospects before anything's signed. That's the reason we don't talk much. There are countries which are very interested in the Rafale. I think that this first sale to a big Arab country will trigger a snowball effect.
Among the countries interested in the French fighter planes are Qatar, Malaysia, and India, with which Paris has been negotiating the sale of 126 aircraft since January 2012.
Well, now for a look at the markets, we're joined in the studio by Ari Chertov from the data analysis firm TipRanks. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. What are you looking at?
Oh, thanks for having me. We're going to talk about two companies, Walmart and Priceline. Both are reporting earnings this week on Thursday before the market opens. And there are some interesting things going on there. So Walmart are very active in trying to expand their business and increase revenue. So some of the things they're doing, for instance, aside from sales on various products, like on Black Friday they had discounts on electronics and other products, they're offering now 24/7 services in some of their stores across the U.S. They're also trying to expand their e-commerce business to try to break into that market and gain an edge there. In addition to that, they're expanding with physical stores in various places. For instance, they're trying to enter the grocery market with smaller stores aimed at I guess smaller period products, more consumables.
With like a boutique store?
Not quite boutique, more for products that have a smaller consumption time period. They're expecting to open some 5,000 stores across the U.S. In addition to that, they're hoping to expand into Canada. They wasted literally no time from when Target announced that they're closing their stores in Canada. They said they're going to basically fill that void and open some 400 stores across the country.
Well, how do you think Canada will receive Walmart?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess we'll wait and see. Obviously, Walmart are optimistic. They think it'll be a good idea. I mean, Target didn't do that well, but.
Well, let's actually go on to some of the other earnings that we're expecting, such as Priceline. What do you have to say about them?
So Priceline have a very strong history of beating estimates. 15 consecutive quarters they've done that. So we'll talk some numbers. Analysts are expecting between $9.4 and $10.10 per share earnings, up from about $8 same quarter a year ago. They're also expecting $1.8 billion in revenue, which is higher than the company's guidance of 1.75. So if history is any indication, they should continue to beat these estimates. But still, there's some serious headwinds in their way. One, of course, is the strengthening dollar, which will hurt their earnings. Another is that their competitors are actively trying to, I guess, be more of a presence in that market. For instance, Expedia recently acquired Orbitz, and they've been making several acquisitions in the recent past. So that's another thing that'll likely hinder their market position. Another thing is IBM recently announced that they're going to take legal action against Priceline for patent infringement. A lot of the service has been using software that IBM developed years ago, and they haven't paid any royalties on it, according to IBM. So Priceline haven't made any comment yet, and IBM hasn't quoted any dollar price yet as to the extent of the legal action, but we'll wait and see how the markets react.
Exactly. We'll wait and see how those results come. And thank you so much for your insight, as always, Ari Chertoff. We do appreciate it here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, now moving on with the rest of our coverage. After years of frigid relations between the U.S. and Cuba, a family-run airliner in Florida now expects a surge of traffic, this time in the skies. Here's that story.
When John Fay heard that the U.S. was easing trade and travel rules to Cuba, he decided to take his planes to new heights. He and his wife own a charter company in Southwest Florida and are now looking to add Cuba to their destinations.
It'll be satisfying if we get it done, because, you know, if our pie is this big now, it might be that big. Because, what, it's the largest island in the Caribbean. There's 11 million people down there. Beautiful beaches, weather.
With only 90 miles between Cuba and Florida's coast, many here want to tap into a market that's been all but closed to Americans for over 50 years. While tourism to Cuba is still banned, those visiting for religious, education, or family reasons are among 12 categories of travelers to have restrictions eased. The changes also open a door for U.S. companies to do business with the island's emerging private sector.
Florida stands to benefit from many different sectors of the economy that are in need in Cuba. So, for example, materials, building materials, potentially construction, infrastructure, agriculture.
Others aren't celebrating just yet. Jay Brickman works in a company that ships food and farm products to the island, which were already partly exempted from trade sanctions. He says a lot has to be sorted out before trade with Cuba can increase.
The key word is eased. It's important to understand that the embargo is still in place. Consequently, I think in the short run we will not see much impact. Little by little, as people understand how to work within the rules of both countries, we should see an increase in trade.
Not everyone in Florida plans to do business with the communist island, though. Among the local Cuban-American community, such talks still stir up passions.
I wouldn't do business with Cuba on principle, because I think it's a country that has only demonstrated that it doesn't have respect for human rights, and that it's not interested in moving towards democracy.
After a first round of historic talks in Havana, the U.S. and Cuba admit they'll have to overcome deep rifts. But while the road to normalized ties will likely be a bumpy one, many U.S. businesses are warming up their engines ready for takeoff and trade.
And now for a closer look at what the media has been covering, we're joined in the studio by Daniel Roth. Thanks for being with us. What do you have for us today?
Thanks for having me. Today we're talking Google Glass. I don't know if you remember, but this was the hottest thing in 2012.
Indeed.
Not so much anymore. Essentially, Google Glass is shattered. 2009, they started experimenting in the secret Google X laboratories, and they came up with this thing that in 2012 was the biggest deal. Time magazine called it the best invention of the year. Vogue had this 12-page spread on it. It was everywhere. The Simpsons had it. Everyone was talking about Google Glass.
So a lot of high hopes for this product.
There was a lot of high hopes, but very quickly it became apparent that it was, I don't know, how should I put this, nerdy, or it wasn't going to catch on. And it didn't catch on.
With the masses, at least, right?
It severely didn't catch on. They had this idea that they could send it out to the world by charging a lot of money. getting journalists, thought leaders, these types of people to wear it and experiment with it and comment on it. And it just didn't happen. That, along with an affair, an illicit affair within the Google X grounds, all led to this just crashing.
Wow, well, thank you so much for your insight as always. We do appreciate it. We look forward to you coming back tomorrow. That does conclude our global economic coverage here today. Join us tomorrow at the Jaffa Port, same time, same place. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you again for watching.